We're back on New Talk, the opposite of old talk, right here on Synergy TV. And we just left before the break talking about consent, and I was confiding in my two guests that consent is actually a really difficult conversation to have, even with close friends. I've had conversations with close friends of mine who did not know that what they were doing with significant others or folks that they wanted to be in a sexual or romantic relationship with could very well be defined as sexual assault. Because how we have conversations about negotiating consent as men is, if you keep on pushing and she eventually says yes, well then it's okay. How do we have a conversation about that? Because we're adding it to the syllabus now, right? How do you have a conversation about that in a way that helps people understand that in its easiest sense, that if you ask and she tells you no, then you leave her alone? Or even for same-sex relationships. Because it sounds easy, but it's not.
It does sound easy, but that's because I think of it like explaining it to a child. Basically, if she says no or he says no, because we always seem to forget that male rape is a reality. And women, like, I've actually heard it from a lot of guys' mouths. They would be happy if a woman raped them because at least they're getting some. And yeah, this is the place where I'm from. Yeah.
What?
And
that's a thing?
Yeah, it's a thing.
Okay.
But the reason is that it needs to boil down basically to respect and teaching children from a very young age to respect each other's bodies. It's like the example I just gave with the boy hitting the girl. Teach him not to hit the girl instead, right? To tell her he likes her, to, I don't know, give her a flower. I don't know.
Right.
All of these examples could work, but in doing so, you also teach him her body is hers, and he needs to not damage that body. He needs to respect it and appreciate it as his. Right. And the same way, his body is his, and nobody has the right to injure him, hurt him, or do anything to him that he's not comfortable with.
Right. So, two questions. The first one is, so in this class, in this sex ed course, now we have to define rape for folks?
I think that defining rape gets very broad in this context.
Right.
Right? Because you could get something very specific to something as general as sexual interaction without explicit consent.
Right.
Right.
Which is actually kind of broad, in my opinion.
Right.
Right. So we shouldn't, or we should?
We should talk about it. But I think that maybe the better way to have that conversation is to talk about all the different iterations of rape and types of rape, and how you might do something unintentional that might otherwise be considered rape. Because there are a lot of unintentional rapes that actually do occur. And even women probably are just going to be like, well, I eventually said yes. And eventually said yes probably means there was coercion of some kind involved, right?
Right, yeah.
And they might not think of it that way. So I don't know if that would count as specifically defining rape, but certainly having a discussion about all the different ways in which it can happen.
Okay.
I mean, the government has definitely defined rape.
Yeah.
Our definition is obviously not as broad.
No, our definition by our legislation basically says if a man penetrates a woman, it's rape. Rape requires penetration.
Right.
And it doesn't view it the other way as well. So that way, our laws basically only cater to women who are penetrated as being victims of rape and having any legal say.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem. This is why we need sexual education in schools.
Yeah.
Because how are we going to know that, how are we going to know that what is okay and what is not okay? How do our children learn about their rights? And this ties into sexual education or health for life education. How do they know about their rights? How do they know what they are entitled to and what they're not?
Right. I had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and I think this is important here as well, that we were trying to figure out what's the term that we were looking for? It's not sexual abuse, but
Yeah.
right, withholding sex as abuse, right? I am going to be absolutely honest to all of y'all. I don't actually know what that means because we having a conversation about my body is mine. So if I decide to withhold sex for whatever reason, that should be fair game. But for some people, that can be defined in intimate relationships as abuse. Is that something that we need to at least ask a question about here?
Well,
because I'm confused.
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
That's an interesting topic. I would say that withholding sex, you see, it's the word withholding that makes it strange. Because if you just say, you know, someone doesn't want to have sex in a relationship, there's nothing there.
Right.
You know, withholding sex suggests that the other person is entitled to this sex.
Right.
That you are not providing.
But they're not.
But they're not.
Right.
However, you know, for many people, sex is an emotional experience.
Right.
Right.
And so I could see that perhaps it can be viewed as denying some sort of emotional connection.
It could be, but
I don't know that I agree
I
with
take
that.
it in the director, like he has some of his own thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that.
Right, but and I say that because it connects to the idea of how we teach young people about their bodies.
healthy relationships as well.
A lot of how we are trained as young people, regardless of whether or not we have the talk with our parents, as our bodies are not our own. For the majority of our young adult, for the majority of our lives as young people, rather.
Right.
There's a bunch of people making decisions for us. So we begin to think. I'm questioning here. Do we begin to think when we get older that folks who are in our care, their bodies belong to us? As a result of our adultness, I feel like that's what's happening.
Well, my view on it is that what you're talking about really is nurturing healthy relationships with each other, right? And forgive me, Trini Public, but I think that's something that most of us have not been able to do.
Yeah.
Given by our divorce rate and given by the amount of failed relationships I see on a daily basis.
Right.
I'm sorry.
And even how we even deal with breakups with, or even deal with like the stress of everyday life while we are in committed relationships, bringing to mind the story of this gentleman who murdered his wife and attempted to kill his young daughter before ending his own life.
Exactly.
We don't have the tools to even use sexual and romantic relationships as an opportunity to heal past whatever stresses and difficulties and trauma that we experience in everyday life. And it brings me to what I think is going to be one of the last questions I'm going to ask for the day. Is if we're having a conversation about sex ed, then we have to talk about lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender people.
Yes, of course.
Which, you know, we doesn't want to... because I know I'm talking about it on TV, I stuttered. Because I know how people deal with that. Right? I know how folks watching at home, but I mean, these are folks who are just as much citizens, just as much human as we are. And even when we have sex and sexuality conversations in schools or at home, we completely toss them to the wayside. We're not having conversation about them even when we are talking about sex. How do we solve that?
Right, and it's part of the thing that it's part of the curriculum that we found that most teachers feel uncomfortable with.
Right.
They don't want to teach.
So it's present in the current.
From what I've read, there's like a light section on sexuality, but it isn't fully explained.
Okay.
So it's more inferential. Yeah.
Well, remember that syllabus that the HFLE that I'm assuming you're referencing?
Yeah.
That's primary school, right?
Right.
There's actually no HFLE for secondary school yet.
Right.
They're still developing that curriculum, and I believe that LGBT or LGBTQ is going to be in it.
Right.
I can't say for certain, but I think that it will be a part. We just don't have one yet.
Okay.
Right.
So as we begin to wind up, what else do we need? Even if it goes beyond a sex education syllabus, what else does the state, do NGOs, do even private sector have to provide so that we can make the landscape of sex and sexuality safer for young people? Anything crosses your mind? Yeah? Even if it is like condom dispensaries on corners.
The thing that actually popped into my mind was openness. We need to be able to openly have these conversations and be free to express our thoughts on it, to be free to have the conversations that are necessary to make us functional human beings. You need to give recognition to the importance of sexuality education, comprehensive sexuality education. And in doing so, also give it funding. I'm not
Always
asking
important.
but just the openness and willingness to make young people's lives better by educating them is the most important thing.
Yeah. I agree. You know, my answer was going to be exactly that: break the silence. Break the silence is a term that you normally hear with reference to gender-based violence, but it applies just as much to sexual education and LGBT education and rights and all of those things in Trinidad and Tobago. You know, the fact is, it's just not something we talk about. It needs to be something that we talk about and that we are comfortable talking to our children and our peers about.
Okay, cool. And there you have it, folks. That's us having as comprehensive a conversation as we can about comprehensive sex education. World AIDS Day is coming up on Tuesday, and if you, regardless of your age, if you don't know your status right now, probably tomorrow and Tuesday and the rest of the week is a good time to go and get yourself tested. It's always important to know your status. It doesn't matter whether or not you are having as much sex as you'd like or not so much. What matters is that you are safe and that those that you love are safe as well. If you have children who you think are old enough and are having sex, you should get them tested regardless of whether or not they're sexually active, so that they can get into the practice of taking care of themselves when they do become sexually active and when they have partners of their own well into their adult years. Thanks so much for watching New Talk. For those of you all who are interested in having a conversation with me about the show into the future, we come to a close of this season on the 13th of December. But I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts about the show so far. So you can hit me up on facebook.com/Brandon J. O'Brien. You can check me on Twitter @Brandon J. O'Brien, and I'm also on Instagram, Brandon J. O'Brien. Feel free to send me a message. Tell me what you think about the show and what you want to see. You've been watching New Talk, the opposite of old talk, right here on Synergy TV. Thanks so much. Blessings, compassion, peace, and love.